It is the technology show where we translate geek into regular speak, and I'm coming to you live from One Apple Parkway, Cupertino, California. As you can see, I'm inside Apple's One's building. As a very special guest, they allowed me to bring my gaming chair with me. Airlines gave me a little bit of a hassle getting it on, but we're here. And why are we here? Well, we're here for WWDC 2022. So if you are not an Apple fan, well, shame on you. But if you're not an Apple fan, this is probably the time for you to tune out of today's show. Because not only are we going to geek out, and I say we, I'm very lucky and happy to have my friend of the show, and arguably the number one Apple fan in Australia. That would probably push me to number two. But given that I'm in Cupertino, California at the moment, then he can be number one. So let's bring him in. Alex, how are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
Are you not envious that I'm sitting in One Apple Parkway and you're over in cold? I believe it's very cold in Australia at the moment. I mean, I'm wearing a t-shirt. Look, it's all nice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, you're enjoying the California weather for sure.
It's, loving the California weather for sure.
Virtually.
Don't have a suntan, but loving it for sure. Right. So yes, the green screen's working nicely. In fact,
I was going to say, just
look.
I was
going to say, look there. I got a dude in my background.
Oh, there you go. He's holding his iPhone up to look around. I was going to say, for those people who are not Apple fans, you should keep watching. Don't tune out, because the reason is because now that Apple,
your mind.
Well, because now that Apple has launched the latest versions of its operating systems and also its new processor and new hardware, the photocopiers will be starting up in Redmond, Mountain View, Seoul, and Shenzhen. So, all the rest have something to copy, which you'll see in about a year or so when they finally get around to copying it. So definitely it's worth your time to watch.
Because Apple always gets painted with the brush of copying people and copying things. And my argument to that's quite simple. I actually say, yes, they do, but they perfect it. They didn't invent the MP3 player, but they perfected it. And they didn't invent the touchscreen. But the iPad was the number one selling tablet and probably still is. So, now when we take you through today's shows and some of the innovations that we saw that are coming, wow. So, Alex, normally I have a presentation and I do things with a Z, and that we only have 30, 40 minutes. I've got none of that stuff today. I thought we would try and take the 2 odd hours of WWDC and just geek out, having a chat.
Impressive.
Yeah,
yes.
But I mean, there were some incredible things. So I think just for everyone that is new to WWDC, right, it's Worldwide Developers Conference. This is about more the software side of Apple and what Apple does, but they always launch hardware, and boy, did they not disappoint this year. It's a kind of that like teaser as to what's going to come in September or June and September, the more hardware-centric events. But I'm salivating. And in fact, while we talk, if I start to get a little bit of drool coming down here, forgive me. So let's kick it off, right? So what Apple did when they fit, and I'm going to try and keep a little bit of an order just so we flow in our thought process. The first thing was iOS 16. That was like what they kicked off the whole conference with. And that's obviously important because for developers, and most people are developing apps nowadays, which is the phone. Wow, 16 looks awesome. I think we say that every year.
16.
We didn't go together last year as well and the year before, but it looks awesome. Some of the points that I took away from that I really loved, and I know this sounds weird, but just the fact that the home screen has finally had some more thought to it. So you can change the size, change the image structure. The search bar, or spotlight as it's correctly called, now will appear at the bottom, which is intuitive, right? Your fingers are there, they're ready to go. Tap, search, or voice search. Yeah, and then of course we go into some of the other features, which I'll hand over to you if you want to
sure.
some of your salient points.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that Apple does is, as you were saying before, it doesn't normally invent things, but it looks to see what others in the market have done. Apple famously had a saying where it gave 1,000 no's for every yes. And we can certainly see where competitors have rushed ahead with virtual reality headsets that they no longer make, or other features which got, they were not perfected and they were cut and only to return later. I mean, one of those examples is when Samsung with the S4 launched the ability to swipe across the screen or use your eyes to head nodding to go up and down a web page or swipe as though you're using the force to get certain things to happen on screen. They launched that with great fanfare in the Galaxy S5, and then the next Android update, they sort of cut that down massively, so you could only just swipe between photos on your gallery, as they call it on Samsung devices, and they took all those things away. Samsung also had the ability to record from the front screen, front camera, and the back camera at the same time. And I think it was a Samsung Note 8 or something where it was there. And then they launched a new version of Android 9 or something at the time, and they took it away. And people were really upset about that. Now, that feature has returned, but it took, a couple of generations before it did. And, Apple was showcasing that feature, I think, in the iPhone 11 timeframe. And there was the Double Take app that was used to allow you to do side-by-side, like you can see right now on the screen, or you could do picture-in-picture. And it took them a while to finally launch that. But I use that, and it replicates that Zoom experience that I like, where I like to interview somebody with their picture taking up the majority of the screen, and then I'm in the bottom right-hand corner.
That's what I normally do. We can do. I don't know if I can do that while we're in this mode. Let me see if I do that.
You probably can. No. But I normally like to keep the focus on the person that I'm interviewing, because you can do that. And so Double Take allows you to do that. And I mean, that's a sort of a similar kind of version. That's what you sort of see in Zoom.
Yeah.
But I mean, on Zoom, you can have that picture superimposed in the bottom right-hand corner. And so, when Apple launches features, it has seen what everyone else has done, and then it has decided to do it. And normally it sets the standard so that what Apple does then becomes the way that it should have been done from the beginning. You'll notice that Apple doesn't have any VR, AR screens. They were rumored to be launching one, but they didn't. And the rumors say that...
I must be honest, I expected to see finally something in that space, but maybe that's the September teaser that we're talking about.
Look, it could be. It could also be that they're waiting for the M2 to be more rolled out, or even an M3, because you've got a lot of processing power in what is effectively a screen inside of a headset in front of your face. You're obviously not putting your phone in there, and so they have to have a lot of the smarts of that sort of device. Now, there was talk that they were going to have a standalone device, a bit like the Oculus Quest, and also devices that were wireless, and they just haven't got that right. And it's something that nobody has gotten right yet. We don't really have true AR glasses. Google launched their Google Glass in the 2000s or maybe the early 2010s. Then it sort of didn't take on the way.
Years ago already.
Yeah, and then it came back as an enterprise sort of version. Microsoft HoloLens was launched. I mean, you should watch the video for HoloLens. It was this incredible video showing all these things you could look at everywhere around in your environment. But the reality was you had an A4 size sheet of paper in front of you that you were looking through. And this, the demo was a lie. I mean, it could do it, but only seeing this much at a time. Imagine if you had an 85-inch TV and you could only see an iPhone size worth, as you looked around to see the entire picture. So, I mean, HoloLens obviously,
right? And I think that's the argument for AR as opposed to VR as well.
And look, there actually are headsets for industry. Like if you are working, I've been to TeamViewer events where they have these headsets about $2,500. It puts an Android tablet on your head, basically. Obviously not the tablet, but you've got all the sort of things inside of the computing power in there. And then there's a little heads-up display that you look into. And what they're able to do there, and this is the sort of thing that will be replicated very quickly when Apple's headsets finally launch. They were being used by mechanics or people doing pick and pack, or people who were checking a big truck before they were going on a journey, and they had to go through several steps, and it was all being shown to them in their field of vision what they had to do. They were able to record the steps they were taking. They were able to see live that, yes, that's the correct box, I've got to put it in, or that's the correct shelf, that's where the thing is supposed to be. And so industry has that sort of thing, but that's clearly not something that is really yet ready for consumer prime time. So Apple launched iOS 16, and all these developer versions are available now. The public betas come in about a month's time. Obviously recommended to only use that on secondary devices. I mean, I normally, after the first or second beta, then take the plunge and put it on my primary device, because normally
you're probably the number one fan in the country and I'm number two. I'm still a bit chicken when it comes to the primary device. Like I'll wait for the .1, .5 or something like that. I just want to quickly rope in there and go back to the iOS side of things. there were two things that really stood out for me in iOS 16. The first was passkey. So what this now does is basically we don't need passwords anymore. And now people are going to say, oh, so it's Face ID. I say, no, nothing like it. In fact, it was actually quite ingenious. So what they do is they create this password, for lack of a description, but it's called a key. But your phone controls everything. So if you go to a computer, now I use Chrome and I use the Chrome reminder service so that no matter which app I'm on or which device I'm on, Apple or Android or Chromebook or Mac, Chrome is the same. What passkey does is it brings up a QR code on the device that you log into, you hold your iPhone and it just unlocks. So your password is actually never ever entered anyway, which
Can't be
means
phished, can't be hacked.
Correct. So that for me was huge with what iOS 16 is going to. And then the other thing that I think they did, which I thought was really cool, is a lot of people have shared passwords. And this is, I'm staying in that whole password world. In fact, in our household, we all use the same passkey. So if I pick up my wife's phone, I can unlock it. If she picks up my phone, we pick up our son's phone, etc., and vice versa. But there's a problem in the world called domestic violence, where people have to flee their homes quickly. And if you have a shared account, if you have a shared bank account, if you have a shared device, one of the new features under passkey and under or safe, I think they called it safe key, was that the person or the victim in this instance would be able to turn off that sharing, even if they weren't the people that created the original shared account. So things like photos, which we take for granted that we share, which would show where you are, it gives away your location, etc. The victim would now be able to turn that off. That's just brilliant thinking. That's like so out the box and and is necessary. So, that whole
I think that required people to have individual accounts which were shared under a family scenario.
Correct.
And so you would have
it without,
that's right. It wasn't sharing an account where it was the same Apple ID and password. It was multiple different ones. You could go in and switch off,
etc. And we can turn it off. So I really like that. I thought that, because Apple's been quite a big advocate on privacy for the last year or so, even the adverts with the lock and so on. So that was really cool. Trying to think of what else. What else?
Obviously the Apple started off with the lock screen. You can now modify the lock screen. You can have different fonts and colors and styles, images. There's a whole stack of images that they're available. You can have your photos. You can put widgets on the lock screen so that they're there. Right. And the rumor is that the iPhone 14 will have an always-on display, as we've seen on Android devices for some years. But now that Apple has that LTPO screen, which is on the iPhone, on the Apple Watch, which allows the Apple Watch to stay on without, like if you've got the analog watch and you normally see the second hand moving around, it will remove the second hand. It'll dim the screen and it will just display what the time is, and which allows you to see what's on the screen, but also saves you a lot of battery power. So the rumor is that's coming to the iPhone 14, and these widgets will be there. Now, interestingly, Apple did not bring that lock screen to iPad OS 16, and that was mirroring what they did with the widgets. They launched the widgets in iOS 12 on iPhones, but they didn't bring the widgets until iOS 13 for the iPad. And so I suspect it'll be the same thing for next year. Another cool feature was the ability to, when you bring up the, anywhere that you can anywhere you've got the keyboard, you can tap the microphone icon and you can speak in pretty much whatever language you want. But normally for most people watching, it's English. And it will then voice to text that incredibly quickly, and it does it all on device. So you're not sending something to the cloud. Siri's much faster. You can actually now tell Siri, as you could in iOS 13, you can ask it to take you into plane mode. That used to be a one-way trip because it needed the internet to be able to say, hey, turn plane mode off. Well, now you can do that because the processing is done on device. And so one of the things they showed was the ability to talk, but the waveform on the keyboard did not appear. The keyboard stayed. And so you would be getting live autocorrect type suggestions for words that appeared on the screen that may have gotten wrong. And you could tap and type and select things. So the ability to use your voice and your text interchangeably on the same interface without having to wait for waveforms to disappear and reselecting the keyboard is going to make that natural user interaction with our technology that a step closer. I mean, the Star Trek natural user language environment where you just talk to the computer and it knows everything and it doesn't need any kind of fixing and help is a wonderful thing. And Apple did announce just a couple of weeks ago, a whole swag of new accessibility features, which include the ability, for example, to hold your phone up to a door if you're a low vision or blind person. The phone can see there's a door in front of you. It's telling you audibly how far away that door is. And then when you get to it and you hold the phone in front of it, it tells you what the door says if it's got writing on it. And you can also imagine that somebody with a, walking one of those sticks with the balls on it with the ball on it for the blind people to be able. Well, the thing is, if you're holding a phone and you're holding that stick at the same time, really, you can imagine that's something that's being built to just work seamlessly with the forthcoming Apple augmented reality glasses. And I did see that with the original Google Glass, where there was a lady that was working with Telstra, and there's a video on this online, I'm sure you can still find it, and she was low vision or blind, and she had the Google Glass on, and when she went to the shops and held up an item in front of her glasses, it would read out and tell her.
Apple, you're holding a can of Coke, whatever it is. Hey, Mark, I've got a thumbs up. We got a thumbs up from Mark. The other thing that was also where LiDAR was introduced a couple of years ago. So it's good to see they're starting to use that. But the other thing and I think Sydney, lucky enough, is one of the included cities. What they're doing with their enhanced maps now, with their whole look around and their animation of their maps and that. I've always said, and in fact, it was either last week or the week before, but I even made a public apology and ate some humble pie. But I've always hated Apple Maps. Always. I've always found it to be a terrible product. I have to take that back. Since I've moved up to the Gold Coast, I've actually been using Apple Maps more than I've been using Google Maps. I've never used Waze. Waze is a little bit Mickey Mousey for me. I just find it a little bit too enemy,
Waze is specifically for driving. And in fact, it's interesting to note that when Apple updated Apple Maps in iOS 13, which is, a year ago,
some of the Waze features, like that's what I'm saying.
The Speedo in Australia, which was never there. And I think it's only showing you like the actual road. It's not, the speed on that road is not showing you the live, kilometers per hour, which is unfortunate. But you could also share accidents on the road and share things. You couldn't share police, I don't think.
And it's accurate. And that's what I was saying. So, and the one feature they've put in there, which I love in voice, is go through the lights and then turn left at the net. When you get like two sets of lights really close together, I've often turned too early. I've gone the wrong way. So it starts to actually think more intuitively. And then with their new 3D animation and that. So as I said, I actually I went up onto my soapbox on this forum and I said, well, I take it back. And I'm using Apple Maps now. And I've got CarPlay in the car as well. So it just blends so nicely.
And if you have an Apple Watch, you can feel it vibrating.
I do. So that's the other reason I use it.
Vibrations left
alert
to right
as well, especially on a motorbike. The Apple Maps really works really nicely. Now, you mentioned M2, which was kind of next on the list after we went through the whole iOS and they started to make hardware. So M2, the reason they spoke about M2 was that new MacBook Air. And I can feel, I'm actually going to just put my hand here just to make sure that the drool's not running down. OMG. That's all I can say on that device. I left the Air format and went back to MacBook Pro for the simple reason there wasn't enough ports. And I just felt that the processing capability of the Air, I'm talking about before M1 now, right? I'm talking about Intel. Just it was lacking. The silver, the bezel around, the framing, I just felt that Air wasn't what I needed at that stage of my life.
And you were talking about like the 2017 Air or something, the Air before had the big wide bezels. Because I had an Intel based MacBook for 2020, and I've got the late 2020 MacBook Air M1, and it's got much smaller bezels around.
Yes, I'm going back 4 or 5 years ago, because I'm already 2 years on my MacBook Pro, but I just felt that it wasn't doing what I needed to do. And then also they took away the MagSafe, and you had to use one port for it. To me, it was just a terrible device. I'd rather spend $500 more and get a MacBook Pro. That was my mindset. Yes. Well, that's changed. I think when it's time for upgrades towards the end of this year, MacBook Air is so high up on my list. So besides the weight, and now it truly is to its name. I mean, they're talking about 2.5 pounds or something.
2.7 pounds, 1.25 kilos. It's slightly, so I think it's 1.25 or something kilos or 1.3. It's slightly lighter than last year's, than the M1 Mac, which retained that styling from before. So this is a new styling, got the new sort of rounded edges. Looks a bit more like a smaller version of the 14 or 16 inch. Very thin screen. The screen is 13.6 inches as opposed to 13.3. So it's only a marginal increase, but they actually have it now exceeds the 16 by 10 aspect ratio, and it has a 1080p camera in the top. And alongside the left and right of the camera, but I'm looking at my laptop now, which is the M1 from 2020, and beside the camera is just a big black bar beside the camera. But on the MacBook Air, the same as the 14 and 16 inch MacBooks, you have the notch. And so on the left and right hand side of the notch is a menu bar. So that's an extra bit of space that you were never using before. They didn't take anything away. They gave you that extra bit of space at the top, which was really quite spectacular. Now, the interesting thing is
MagSafe is back.
So MagSafe is back. I've got the
and MagSafe. So that's
and if you buy a separate, now you can buy a charger that's got 2 USB ports, so you can charge your phone and the computer at the same time. They also have a separate charger that you've got to pay extra for, or you can buy a third-party one, which is 67 watts and plugged in to the MagSafe adapter cable. With the 67-watt charger, you can charge your MacBook Air to 50% in 30 minutes. So it's the same sort of deal as when you buy a 20-watt charger for your phone. Now, interestingly, they also launched an M2 MacBook Pro. Now, the M2 was 20 or 30% faster. You know, it delivers more power, got better GPU. It's got more, bigger, more powerful primary cores and more powerful secondary cores. But the MacBook Pro didn't get the same redesign. It still has the same form factor as the previous M1 MacBook Pro.
Come out again towards the end of the year. That's what I'm saying.
That will probably come out, but there's right now the pricing's pretty similar, especially if you go for 16 gig of RAM and a 512 gig SSD. There's not much difference. So the thing is, do you get a MacBook Pro or do you get a MacBook Air with M2? Now, the MacBook Air M2 still remains a fanless design. And where I on my Intel,
kicker, right?
Well, it isn't. It isn't. Where I on my Intel Mac right now, my AirPods and system would be using all of its power to try and cancel the noise of the fan that sounds like it's the space shuttle taking off to the moon. On the M1 and M2 MacBook Air, there's no fan. Now, the MacBook Pro does have a fan, and that fan is for sustained workloads. Now, the MacBook Pro still has an improved camera, I think, but it doesn't have the notch. So it's the same form factor, doesn't have MagSafe. But if you're going to be doing more pressing, more sort of power-hungry workloads or constant video editing or something that just needs, sustained performance to render things, then you will unquestionably go, if you want that form factor, for the MacBook Pro 13. But if you're just an everyday user who does Zoom calls, who surfs the internet, uses Office suites, surfs social media, does email, and just does the everyday, plays, simple games and does the everyday stuff that, and of course, games on Macs and iPads are very advanced, these days. But
this is the next thing, right? The capability of the M2 processor and Metal, what's it, 3? I think
Metal 3, yeah.
So, and I've been saying the whole day, I don't want to give spoilers away. Well, this is my show, so I'm going to say what I want to say. But we watched Resident Evil being played on a MacBook Air. Now, you actually have to pause there for a moment, right? Macs have always been given or painted really badly as a bad gaming machine, which is not fair. That's on the publisher side. The hardware on a Mac has always been able, especially a Pro, and especially an M1 Pro, has always been able to support gaming. But the publishers
and the iPads and iPhones as well.
But let's talk machine for machine, right? But this was a big game. Resident Evil is not an indie game. It's not Mickey Mouse. It is a massive game. It's one of the biggest selling games in its genre. And they showed this on the MacBook Air, and it was seamless. There was just so much going on that video clip, and it was just super smooth. This is a fanless computer. Now, if you've played on a gaming machine, which, as everyone knows, my son is a huge gamer. He's got 9 fans in his box, and they light up and they do all the wonderful things. But believe me, when that NVIDIA card kicks in, because it's full graphics mode, those fans are spinning full blast. And he has liquid cooling as well, or air cooling or something on there as well. So to play a game.
It's a shame you can't harness all that fan activity
game processing
to get it to blow onto a little turbine so it can actually generate some power for you from all the power that you're using.
At the moment, just sucking power.
I mean, Al Gore would probably. I mean, he's a board member of Apple, so he probably hates all those PCs that waste all that energy. But yeah, absolutely. The Mac has always been, and Apple and iPhones and iPads have always been dark horses in gaming. But Apple has worked very hard with Apple Arcade. It's got a stack of first-party games.
Most of the games I review on the show, when I do are Apple Arcade games. I try and look for the indies. But I think next year, and hopefully you will be joining me next year for the WWDC2022 show. Watch how many new games. I'm talking about the big games, right? Your top fives, your League of Legends, all these big games. Watch how many games are now available on Mac, because what we're also forgetting is our Mac, which has already got M1 and will get M2, has metal capabilities. It's incredibly well priced, has a beautiful 4K screen. Every gamer that doesn't have $5,000 or $6,000 to spend on a gaming PC can now drop, $1,800, I think, in Australia to get an iMac and have a beautiful 27-inch, fully capable machine that can play games. And I think we're going to start to see. And then, of course, from there, as you've rightfully said, take it down to the iPad, or iPhone. These devices.
And the iPad, iPhone, and Macs are all compatible with PS5 and Xbox Series X controllers. Yeah. So it's the same controller you've already got. And I mean, in fact, you can play cloud versions of.
Well, that's Xbox the other thing, right?
PlayStation and Google, a lot of people Stadia games as well.
Correct, and they say, I'm never going to buy a Mac. I'm a gamer. Guys, play on the cloud. Like, just get a Steam account and play in the cloud. Like, that's where you should be playing anyway. You should never be downloading it onto your machine.
Some microsystems said the network is the computer about 20 years or 30 years too early, but it certainly is today.
Well, did you see they actually had a picture with the word, they always have the app icons, gaming. So, I mean, Apple is heavily committed to gaming from now on.
They have been for a long time.
But they're going to
the first apps that you could run on an iPod before they had the iPhone were games. You know? I mean, the Apple II, when I was a kid, its biggest use, besides using it for Pascal programming and logo, with the little turtle that was running around and drawing things, was Karateka, Prince of Persia, all those Sierra games. I mean, the Mac, Apple's been in gaming for a long time.
Yeah.
But
I'm talking about, mainstream being mainstream.
Yeah, mainstream. Yeah. Look, Apple has been promoting its gaming chops for a long time, but of course they had to fight against the Xbox and the PlayStation and the Nintendo Switch. But you pay Apple a few bucks a month, and you got over 100 games in Apple Arcade. That's what they launched with it. They've got plenty more now.
I have to say, I've got the Apple. I think it's the Apple One account, so I get music.
Yeah, I've got the same thing too. I've got the full one.
2 gigs or something.
2 terabytes of
terabytes of storage.
So let me give you a tip as well. I was talking to a journalist friend who said, I've run out of space on my 2 terabyte of iCloud. I've got all the kids, I've got all the photos, what do I do, sort of thing. And I said, well, good news. Apple One has just been launched. And if you buy the 2 terabyte version of Apple One for $39.95, which includes Apple Arcade, Apple TV, Apple Music, the whole thing, you can actually get the 2 terabytes from that. And then you can pay an extra $14.99 a month to get the 2 terabytes that you can get through iCloud. So you can actually have 4 terabytes of iCloud on your Apple. And a lot of people don't know that. And if they need that to back up everything, they can. But unquestionably, the Mac, especially with the new Mac OS Ventura, the new version of the operating system, they now have a thing called Stage Manager. I mean, a lot of it is obviously an improvement, refinement of Big Sur and of the Mojave or Mavericks, whatever the current version is that we're using. But the Ventura has this thing called Stage Manager. So what it does is it shows you the windows you're looking at, and on the left-hand side of the screen, you get to see the extra apps you have open, and you can pair multiple apps together, and so you can easily multitask. Like even more, like instead of swiping upwards or pushing the app expose button and getting a whole stack of different windows on the screen, of which there might be 20, depending on how many tabs and things you have open.
So I think
Well, it's too
I
much.
think
It's
to
too
unpack
much.
that a little bit further, because I sit here. So I mean, I'm looking at you on my MacBook at the moment, but I have a 32-inch widescreen behind me, and I have multiple windows. And then, if you're using the shortcuts in the hot corners, if I swipe down to the bottom right, everything goes, and I can see all my open windows. And it's actually quite scary. In fact, if I do that now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 11. Let me just get you back into focus. I have 11 windows, and in those windows, some of them are browser tabs with multiple tabs. So just for the people that are listening that are not watching, basically the fact that you'd be able to now have them all there and just
On the
click.
left-hand side of the screen.
A dock of a dock. And it was quick. Did you see when you click the button, it's so quick how it just changed into that.
And you could pair
versions
multiple apps
inside it.
together.
Yep.
So you could have
that.
a notepad, you could have a browser and an email all popping up at the same time in that sort of grouping. You could have multiple groupings. And the reason that Apple introduced this new form of multitasking, because multitasking is pretty good on a Mac, we're all used to it, but they did that so they could emulate, have exactly the same interface on the iPad Air or the iPad Pros with the M1 processor. That is the only iPad. The older iPads with the A series chips will not get Stage Manager. Now, before I move on to iPad OS or the iPad's iPad OS 16, one of the cool new features of Mac OS Ventura is the ability to take your phone, and if you have a Belkin adapter that just clips onto the back, you can clip it onto the front of your computer, and it just sits over the top of where the camera is, and it's using the 3 cameras on the back of your iPhone, using one of those 3 to give you a much higher resolution image, because the camera on your iPhone is better than the camera that's built into the top of your Mac. And it had center stage, so as you moved around, the camera would follow you. It also had this incredible feature whereby using the ultra wide camera on an iPhone 13, it was able to show you like what's in front of the desk right in front of me, as though I had a camera pointing down. Now, there was no camera pointing down. I've seen Apple people do that.
You do that.
This is using incredible computational smarts to take an image that's coming on a diagonal and yet present it as though it's looking directly flat. So it's going to make all those demos and influencer videos and tutorials so much easier and simpler.
You do that so many times when we've been on a video call. You've held your phone above your desk to show us what you're doing, or you've put it into a bracket so that your hands are free.
But it's a bit of a pain. You've got to have 2 separate devices.
But I think when you go to the influencers, like especially people that do makeup in that, being able to use an iPhone camera to get that depth as opposed to the 1080 that we're getting off, the inbuilt camera or built-in camera. Sorry.
Another thing for influencers, I mean, if they've got the palettes of different makeup, you can just be looking down, and then you can go like this and paint it on wherever you're painting it on yourself, and if you're that way inclined, and people can see you choose it and then see you paint it all with the one camera, and you keep your focus on that. Now, another cool thing that influencers are going to love, and again, I implore people watching, go to youtube.com/Apple or go to apple.com, watch the keynote. It's 1 hour and 47 minutes. I want to play some video shortly before we run out of time, just some highlights of the event. But the keynote, I mean, don't watch one of those, like The Verge has a 24-minute cut down version. So much is cut out. It is not worth it. You can watch it when you want to watch it. And one of the things you see is the demo where you can click a button and suddenly your face is much brighter. It's like you have a ring light in your face.
I need that. I need to make mine darker. I'm a little bit too light.
Well, I mean, it probably would do a better job, but they explain that if you're sitting behind a window where there's a lot of light outside, and normally your face will be darker because you're not facing towards the sun, well, this can really brighten it up. Now, for me, my eyesight's gotten a bit sensitive recently, and to have a ring light, I can't have it right in front of me because it's too bloody bright. I've got to have it sideways sort of thing to shine, but I don't want to be looking directly at that ring light. And if I put it down to a temperature that's if it's too low, then it's not really helping. So to have this virtual ring light built in is awesome as well. So, really, you have to watch the keynote. If you go to apple.com, I've got a bunch of pages I want to show you, but all the different updates are there. And, having this new multitasking capability on the iPad with M1 processors and soon M2, you have the same Stage Manager effect, You can now have windowed applications on an iPad. It's not quite the same where you can get 2 windows or 3 or 4 side by side and sort of laboriously, adjust them with your mouse. But you can still do it, which you couldn't do before. And most importantly, for a lot of people, if you have an external monitor, 27, 30-inch, whatever size, you can now use that external monitor as though it was an external monitor for your Mac. But if it's on your iPad, you can have apps up there. You can move the mouse, the cursor backwards and forwards. You can drag things backwards and forwards. You cannot place files on the Mac desktop. That they don't have that as yet, and I don't know if they ever will. But you can see that the way that multitasking is done on a Mac is still the best multitasking for apps that are designed for the traditional keyboard and trackpad and apps that are designed for the windowing experience. So rather than Apple trying to add touch screens onto the Mac to try and emulate a Windows tablet.
That I've always moaned about the fact that I can't have a touchscreen experience on my Mac. And then I've thought, well, actually, I don't want fingerprints all over my screen anyway.
Yeah.
But I also use an iPad when I go to meetings because I want the battery life and I want the portability, but I don't have OS on my Mac OS on my Mac, on my iPad. And I think this could be finally almost the bridge that we're getting at. The iPad will be more capable.
Apple always said it is not going to merge Mac OS and iPad to have a Mac pad. But I think it's going to have, because it's adding more and more features from the Mac in a new and exciting, simpler and easier way to the iPad. Already the iPad and the Mac has the same processor, the M1. Soon it'll have the M2. And given the fact that they have internal, memory is built onto the die, it's all there. It doesn't have to go outside of the motherboard to another chip. Everything is super fast. There is absolutely nothing stopping Apple from allowing Mac OS apps to run on an iPad. And I can just imagine that in a year or two, they'll just say, right, you want to run those Mac apps in a window? Well, we can do windowing now. They could even have it if they wanted to when you move the trackpad. Well, not as a VM. Forget about the VM because it's running iOS, which is a cut-down version of Mac OS. It can put whatever they need into it to support Mac programs. But you can even imagine it that when you've got a Mac app on the screen, the little dot that is the cursor in iPad OS and also iPhone if you use a Bluetooth mouse can turn into a arrow whenever it's on a Mac app. And then as soon as you move it out again, it's a dot, right? I mean, they could do that or you just leave it as a dot. It doesn't really matter. But, there's nothing stopping them technically from doing it. But Apple is always about taking its developers, most important. Without the developers, you haven't got apps. Without the developers, you haven't got an ecosystem. And of course, the developers need Apple to build an ecosystem. But unless you take developers slowly down the journey and build in widgets and build in Catalyst and build in these things that over a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 year time span, allow everyone to sort of come across, build the modern apps, and then, right, okay, we've got more than enough power to run your old stuff. Apple says 1,000 no's for every yes. Apple called the Windows tablet computers, they were derisive in calling them refrigerators with a built-in toaster. I mean, nobody wants the toaster fridge, but having an iPad that is as powerful as a Mac that could run Mac apps but still maintain my pristine iPad environment would be excellent because Apple does have a device with the stylus, the fingers, touch,
and advertising for iPad. Any of the iPad Pros, their payoff line is your next computer is not a computer.
It's not a computer.
They're getting us closer and closer to that environment.
Well, because managing Macs and more so managing Windows PCs, it's a bloody nightmare. I've got a friend who's really into PCs and he uses Chocolatey and he uses Ninty or something. He's got all these things. He's got all these batch files. I mean, he's a wizard at configuring Windows PCs to incredible levels. So everything's automatically updating, but none of that, absolutely zero of that, is required on an iPad because it updates flawlessly. All the apps update easily. You don't have to worry about Flash plugins or weird stuff. It's all designed to be as self-contained and as easy to use. And if you were in a coma in 2010, you got the iPad, you used it for a few months, and you went to a coma and you just woke up last week, and someone handed you an iPad, you would marvel at how the bezels are smaller and it's thinner and it's lighter and the resolution is higher and But you could use, I mean, aside from learning that you got to swipe up instead of pushing the home button, unless you got one of the original iPads.
It's still intuitive, though.
Everything
right?
that you knew from 2010 is still perfectly valid today.
Yeah.
You don't have to know or use any of the new stuff, and you don't miss out on anything really, because it was all doable, and you would quickly learn.
But your URL address is at the bottom and not the top in Safari on OS.
Well, and one of the reasons they did that, there's two reasons they did it. One was because when the address bar was at the top, when they launched the iPhone 6S and they had the bigger screen. But no, before they launched the iPhone 6S, when they still had the iPhone 5 with a 4-inch screen and Androids had 5-inch screens, they made the address bar disappear when you swiped up, because it gave you that extra bit of space back, which was good. And so when you tapped at the top of the screen to swipe, to scroll back to the top in one tap, something that was there from the very first iPhone, that broke that convention. You had to tap twice in the browser, once to get the address bar, second time for it to go up. So when they put it down to the bottom, not only was it closer for your thumb and fingers to reach, but it restored that ability to tap at the top once and would go back. And a lot of people don't know this. You can put your finger on the tab bar of Safari and you can swipe left and right through your open tabs, which is a wonderful thing that people don't know. A lot of them don't know that you can actually just swipe down the bottom here. I've got my virtual display on here. You can swipe down the bottom and you can go through open apps just like that, just by swiping down the bottom like that. So that's not the tab. That's just open apps.
Yeah.
So
I'm worried about time, because I know you wanted to show a video or two, but I must say that for me, okay, the M2 obviously blew me away and all the specs on it and that, but the updates and the thinking that went into iPad OS is super exciting. You know, all the features we mentioned in iOS will be available in iPad OS.
Except for the lock screen, which will probably come next year.
But I mean, the iPad, you
everything
don't want
else.
it as a lock screen. You're using it as a working device. But it is definitely moved one more step closer to Mac OS or Mac OS capability, which has always been my bugbears. And I'm just missing things that I need, that I use on my MacBook Pro. And from watching the presentation, it seems like, and you hit the nail on the head, you know, Apple does need their developers. And he keeps saying every time, we've listened to you, the most asked for feature. Those are the kind of words that they're using.
Here's one of them. You can now edit iMessages that you send. So if you put "Hey babe" instead of "Hey Gabe," after you've sent it, you can just edit that word. And even before someone has seen, if it just says delivered, they haven't seen it yet, you can undo the sending of a message.
The WhatsApp feature,
which is really cool.
And again, they didn't invent it, but they perfected it, because now you've still got the ability to go back and, like WhatsApp, you can't edit a message once you've sent. You put a little asterisk and go babe or Gabe or whatever it is. Yeah. Now you just tap it, edit, and it updates.
That's it. Another cool thing was Carplay. Now they showed that the Carplay interface looked pretty much the same. They didn't really go too deeply into it.
Car like that, so.
But they said that by the end of 2023, there will be cars where the entire dash is just one giant display. And so in your instrument cluster behind the steering wheel, you can have digital, speedometers, or you can have the digital numbers, you can have revs per meter, you can have weather, you can that whole screen behind the steering wheel can be a map where you're driving through. So, and they said you can have screens all throughout the car. And what it obviously also pointed to, because it's inescapable, that's what an Apple car is going to look like. An Apple car, the whole inside of a bloody Apple car is going to be a screen. Just about, so it was, and those sort of widgets and features are all things that we're going to see in our field of vision through AR and VR glasses when they launch that. So, please go and watch the keynote. But look, if you let me share the screen, I want to show a couple of videos that just give
While you're doing that, I must say the only thing is old Craig, or Craig as they call him in America, was a bit cheesy on this presentation with his little flying around and that. But
and he put his hand through his head. But look,
he's coming out of his shell.
He's having fun, and also, Apple has the world's most advanced operating systems. I mean, as I said before, when I said, I've got a T-shirt that from Apple from about 20 years ago that says something about Redmond, always one step behind Cupertino, and start the photocopiers in Redmond, Microsoft, because Apple's got all the cool features I want to copy. So when I say, because I've seen the clones from Oppo and Huawei, and some of the Mate tablets, they look exactly like iPad clones, right down to the magnetic pen on the top. And so when I say that Redmond Mountain View. Redmond is Microsoft. Mountain View is Google. Seoul is Samsung, and Shenzhen is Huawei and all the other or many of the other phone makers. When it's time for them to start their photocopiers, I really mean it, because these are the features we're going to see copying. One of the things that Apple launched in iOS 16 is the ability to do Facetime continuity. If you have your phone, you can bring your phone to your computer, answer the phone on your watch, take it to the phone, or you can move it across to your computer. So you can now answer the video call, move the phone to your tablet or computer, and you can take the video call on a bigger screen on that. Yeah. So, here's Apple with multiple years of continuity, and Google, right, which gave up on tablets and added its Google I/O, also worth watching, a lot of advanced stuff there, but, announced, we have 20 apps which we've redesigned ourselves and with partners to be working on tablets. I mean, where the heck were those apps 10 years ago when the first tablets arrived and they were just stretched out phone apps? So Google is taking tablet apps very seriously, but Google has only just announced this year, which is not even available yet, the ability to select something on your phone and copy it to a Chromebook or a tablet or another Google device on the same Google account. So that's something they're launching for the first time, and Apple is well ahead. You can also now do SharePlay from Messages. Before you had to be in a FaceTime call, but now you can just be chatting on Messages, and you can say, "Hey, do you want to watch the new Obi-Wan? It came out today on Disney Plus." As long as that person has Disney Plus as well.
SharePlay for me has always been a little bit like I haven't really done it.
But for young kids, it's much easier. They also had a couple of other things. One was collaboration. So on you can have a document, and several of you can be collaborating on it at the same time from your iPads. And they've got this new thing called Freeform. It's a giant whiteboard. Now, Microsoft had a whiteboard in 2017. Other companies have had whiteboards. Zoom has just announced the ability to have a whiteboard inside where multiple people can be drawing on it at the same time. But on an iPad, which is designed for fingers and swiping and touch and the stylus and the mouse and the keyboard, somebody can be working in that corner of the whitepad, somebody of the whiteboard, somebody can be working in that corner, somebody can work in the middle, and everybody can be working on this fluid document at the same time. When Microsoft launched OneNote, you could type and you could draw anywhere on the page. Yeah. What killed it at the time was that people were more used to working in the Word left to right sort of environment. But this is sort of like OneNote on steroids. It's going to launch later,
so it might not launch. You could take a screenshot of text and add it on top. There was layers this way as well as that way on that whole collaboration.
And you could hit one button, and suddenly you're all, all of you are in a FaceTime video call, and all collaborating together. And because people are spread out so far, I mean, we're spread out, thousands of kilometers between us.
Talking of spreading, we're spreading thin on time, mate. So I know you want to show.
So just bring up. Let me share. Yeah.
There's that awkward silence. I can start singing while we wait for this to play.
I don't know. So I suppose you're clicking the button for it to do the share screen.
Don't know why it's not.
Oh no, I probably have to click share on my side. Then I'm going to go share screen. Sorry, yeah, there we go. So I click share, and can you now see my YouTube.com?
I'm going to bring it in for us now. There it is.
Yep. Okay. So this is the youtube.com/Apple. It actually takes you to here, but if you tap on videos, then you get to see a bunch of different videos here. Now, there's an excellent video that is showcasing what the new MacBook Air looks like. Goes for a minute and 20 seconds. I mean, have a look at that.
Cool. I love that part of the preso.
Yeah. Well, that was just the video of that. This is a personalizing lock screen. This is inside Apple Day 1 that showed you a bunch of cool stuff. But here's the Day 2 recap, showing you some cool stuff. Goes for a minute and 20 seconds.
That are listening to the show, that because this goes out as a podcast and a vodcast. We're just on YouTube, and it's just a whole collection. What's the URL? Are you on Apple's YouTube?
I'm on
page,
youtube.com/Apple. So
okay.
And then you click on the word.
You can at least look at the videos in your own time.
Click on the word video. You go there, and you've got the entire 1 hour and 48 minute. That's the entire keynote there. This new video for the MacBook. The new video showcasing some iOS features. Day 1 of the Apple inside the Apple HQ. This is day 2. WWDC is still a 5-day event, still on right now.
Yeah.
And you can join. You go to developer.apple.com
and their stuff,
check it all out.
It's the dev stuff.
Yeah. So But the whole purpose of that original keynote, the one that's up first, they have a developer State of the Union, which developers should absolutely watch. But they're showing to consumers, showing to developers the new things that they can now develop and do. But it's showing to consumers all the cool things that are coming. And, I like to say that this is like a science fiction movie, because it's an hour and 47 minutes, where it's not going to come through in the 24th century. It's going to come through in 3 months. And there's a whole bunch of people around the world right this very second using the developer betas. And the first bits of feedback I've read online, like, well, this is surprisingly stable. Now, there's going to be heaps of bugs over the next 3 months. But in about a month or so, I've got an older iPhone. I'm going to stick iOS 16 when I get back home, and with the developer version, and try it out. But pretty much from the public betas, I don't ever put the betas on my Mac. I rely on that too much. But on an iPad or phones, I don't mind. And I'm going to be absolutely loving it.
I'm sitting here in Cupertino, as you know. I'm inside Apple's building with my chair.
I've been there.
I'm also wait till I get back to Australia before I start putting on my devices. But I must say that it's been a long time since I've watched WWDC and gone, that's really impressive. There's always been the teasers. There's always been one or two things. But this was 1 hour and 47 minutes of just jam-packed innovation. It was just like, and I think it's also, they had to do something substantial. It's the first time they've had the in-person since COVID.
In the past couple of years,
back there in the building.
Yeah. The peak performance event was, back in March, which people should watch if they haven't. That was very cool. That's where I launched the Mac Studio and other things. I just sort of more or less wanted to finish on by saying that, Apple gets one thing really right, and that's the user experience. They really work hard, and if they make a mistake, they fix it very quickly. They iterate very fast. They don't drop too many things. The list of things Apple has dropped and killed is very small when you compare it to Samsung and Google.
Own it, right?
And what Apple has that other people don't have is the distribution. Apple's going to launch Freeform. It's intelligent, a collaboration features and its intelligent collaboration whiteboard, and it's suddenly going to be used by hundreds of millions of people. And even though Microsoft's whiteboard, which does the same sort of thing on Windows 10 and 11 devices, has been out since 2017, you know what? I never heard of it. I heard of it because I was doing a search for Freeform alternatives, and I saw some other one, Fig Jam, looks very cool too. But these people have tried for years and years to get a critical mass. Apple has got critical mass, and now it's layering things on top of that critical mass that are going to be taken up by millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of people. And that's something that Apple has worked hard to build. It's been ridiculed, been told by Michael Dell to sell the shares and sell the company. We've got Microsoft doing weird stuff and taking things out of Windows and annoying people with constant bloody changes on how the thing looks, and you can't even switch it back to the way it was before. And for people who want that, and you got Apple that just chugs along, and now it's so big. It's like that Arab saying, "Don't let the camel's nose under the tent," because next thing you know, the whole camel's in there. Well, Apple's the camel with his nose under the tent, but instead of the tent people trying to push the camel out, people are saying, "More, we want more. Come in."
It's funny you say that, because
here's my money.
Due to the current economy, Apple went from being the most valued company in the world to number 2 to an oil company. And here you're using an analogy of it'll go back. That's only because of inflation and oil prices.
And we don't know how long inflation is going to be around. Apple closed the Apple Turkey store, online store, and then in a few days they opened it with prices that were, I don't know, they were doubled or tripled, but it was a huge jump. Now, people complained that in America, the $999 MacBook Air, which was $1,499 here, did not see a drop to like $899, unless you're an education buyer or something. They always had that education price. The new Mac with the MacBook Air with M2 processor is $1,199, and people were going, if they didn't do it at $999, Apple, when they launched it before at more expensive prices, they've had to pull it back. Yeah, but that was in a pre-COVID world when governments had already printed trillions, but they printed trillions more, and Australia's 1 trillion government debt. America's 30 trillion government debt, and they're giving billions here and there. Excuse me. And so, the strength of the dollar is not going to come back anytime soon. We're lucky that Apple didn't push prices higher. iPhones are going to be more expensive this time too. Everything's getting more expensive, and we're lucky to be in a world where Apple's got $300 billion, stockpile of cash, and they can absorb some of it, but they can't absorb it all. So this is why prices are higher, and thank God they're not higher still, and they're only going to get higher because of the interest rates going up.
Well, Alex, on that note of doom and gloom, mate, I have to ring it off there. But I have to say, and I'm sure you agree, this was one of the most exciting WWDCs. And I mean, I can only imagine the next 3 days when the actual dev teams there are hands-on and playing with this stuff.
Some of those videos,
amazing end of the year. We're going to see some very cool stuff coming out at the end of the year.
Some of those videos that you can watch for developers are very cool. And just finally, the iPhone 6S, 7 Plus, and original SE, you won't be able to get 16. Yeah. It's only iPad Air 3, iPad Mini 5, iPad Pro and up, and it's 2017 and 2018 Macs that, as a minimum, that can get Ventura. So, and also the Apple Watch SE, the Apple Watch 3, which they launched and still selling right now, that won't go to WatchOS 9. So they've finally drawn a line under the sand for some of the really old devices that most people can get.
But I mean, the Watch, that was the other last thing, was the fact that you could they're launching medication on the phone. That was the other note that I had. You could hold a pill bottle, it scans it, and then you can put when you need to take it, what time of the day.
And it tells you the drug interaction. It will remind you, and it'll say, hey, don't take alcohol when you're on this stuff because it's very bad. I mean, it's telling you drug interactions. I mean, why hasn't Google or Microsoft thought of that?
We're going to need to do another show. As I said, we actually left out a few of the good features. But, mate, thank you for coming on. As I said, unfortunately, we always run out of time. We find you at ITWire or alexonline.com.au. Where do we find you? Where's the best place?
At the moment, it's itwire.com is the best place. And also, if you want to watch some of the video interviews that I do, youtube.com/ITWireTV as one word.
As the senior editor for ITWire, that would make sense. Thank you again for coming on board. Really good to have you.
Thanks everyone for watching.
And we'll chat to you soon.
Great to be here. Yeah.
All right,
okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that brings us to the end of it. I am going to have to go out and leave Apple before the security comes and kicks me out, and especially because I've brought in a non-Apple chair. So until next time, keep your screens clean and your knobs shiny.